So thank you everyone for joining us today. It really is about a conversation and about sharing some stories, and it's all around thinking differently around improving IT self-sufficiency. So it's really just setting a little bit of context to today and kind of where we're at. So we know that there's been a big technology shift in the housing sector. We know that kind of the old days of IT being a very closed team, sitting in a little silo doing what it does, looking after the applications that are almost given to the business, has changed. And there has been a massive shift with the digital agenda and the actual business becoming more leading in the technologies and the way in which IT supports them. And we've seen a lot more collaboration between IT teams and the rest of the business. We've also seen a big rise in the sector in Microsoft technologies. So as you all know, Crimson are a Microsoft Gold partner, but recent research done last year was over 78% of the housing sector said that they would be investing and moving forward in Microsoft technologies in the future. In the next 2 years, I think was the fact, and that's whether it's things like Dynamics or Power Platform, or whether it's actually just investing more in the Office 365 suite that you have that you've already invested in. But there's certainly a big kind of concept there of driving forward in new technologies. But one of the big questions that comes about every time that I speak to people around their reasons for maybe choosing this direction or this platform is very much around the reason we're doing it is we don't want to be reliant on costly suppliers. We want to drive or be in control of our own destiny. We don't want technical debt anymore, these old systems that don't integrate. And most importantly, the one word that I always hear really often is around we want to be self sufficient. We want within our teams the control back that we've not had for so long. What that does do is bring great ambition and opportunity to the sector. So, but what it also does is it brings about a bit of a skills gap. And I think everybody is in the same seat where we're talking about as a sector, we have a skills gap if we are to drive forward the Microsoft technologies, the new platforms, and actually be more business led, not necessarily technical led. It's a different kind of skill set. And we know if the rest of the sector and other sectors are doing that, then that does create a challenge in terms of how do we fill that skills gap. So, in true form, the purpose of the webinar today and the conversation with you all is really to look at where Crimson have tackled this challenge and how we have put in place what we call the Crimson Academy to try and fill that skills gap. So today we've got a great panel. We're going to hear from Bob at Microsoft just to really explain how Microsoft are supporting this skills gap that there may be with this big surge of new technologies and changes in the way we do things. We've got Colin with us, CEO from 3C, which many of you know, because this doesn't start, this thinking about being self-sufficient doesn't come in at the end when you've developed something. It starts at the very, very beginning about changing those ways of thinking and starting with the business case about how you really include that in business cases to think about being self-sufficient going forward with your proposal. And then to finish the webinar, we want to share with you how Crimson have taken this challenge. And we have Martin from Digital Native and the lovely Kat from Crimson to talk about what we call the Crimson Academy. And I think this session is really valuable being in the middle of apprenticeship week, because what the Crimson Academy is all about, which Kat and Martin will talk to you, is about bridging some of that skills gap by growing your own. So thinking differently, it's not always about consultants and bringing in, it's about growing your own. And I think for me personally, as many of you know, I'm really hugely passionate about housing. One thing that we've done well is apprenticeships and is growing our own. And we do this exceptionally well in areas that are core business to us or previously been thought of core business. So repairs, our trades team, our customer services, and most recently in things like our housing officers. But is this really, and I feel quite passionate that this is an opportunity for us to look at thinking differently and actually as IT itself is thinking differently, There is a drive to be self-sufficient. Why don't we grow our own and bring in that skill set? And we're going to talk a bit through that today. So I'm just going to hand over to Bob, who's just going to talk to you very briefly around kind of where Microsoft stand on this kind of thinking around skills gap, and then we'll continue with the rest of the speakers.
Thanks, Kira. Yeah, so I was looking for a cat avatar, but I couldn't find one. So yeah, as Kira's kindly introduced myself, I'm Bob Downey I'm a dynamic solution specialist here at Microsoft, working mainly with housing associations in the UK. But before taking on this role, I spent over 10 years delivering CRM projects in the private sector. And I see a lot of similarities where the private sector was a few years ago. So moving from those on-prem systems that lock you into large contracts, but lock you out of doing any real development, to cloud-based platforms like Dynamics that offer you the building blocks to drive innovation, business change, and business insight. And the last year has really accelerated that change. Working with our customers, we've seen the equivalent of a year's digital transformation happen every month across every industry, and housing associations have been no different in that. And this accelerated move to the cloud means that the role of IT will change. It'll be less about infrastructure management and more about innovation. Microsoft will look after your infrastructure. We spend billions every year on your security, your performance, and your innovation, while you focus on business issues and how technology can help. How do we get our residents into their houses faster? How do we best serve those residents? And how can we use technology to help maintain our buildings? Do we build an app? Do we use pre-built apps, or do we use a combination of the both? Our platform allows you to choose any of those options. However, we conducted a report last year with Goldsmiths University of London, and over 2/3 of UK business leaders realised that they face a digital skills gap. And our mission statement as a business is to empower every person and every organisation on the planet to achieve more. So we recognise that there's an onus on us to help fill that digital skills gap. So, as a part of that, Microsoft do provide a lot of certification paths and free training and content to help upskill your people. And we're happy to partner today with Crimson and 3C and Digital Native to specifically address that gap for the housing sector. So I'm really looking forward to today's session, and I think I'll hand over to you, Colin, so you can give an idea of your experience and what you're seeing in the sector.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob. So today's discussion is probably one of the most important topics of the current time, and that's our ability to adapt. And boy, have we needed to adapt recently. I mean, we've got used to doing things online, to people constantly looking at our chins rather than the eyes, telling everyone they're on mute, which we haven't had to do today, which I'm very pleased about. And also to when presentations are being given, the words next slide please, becoming a part of the landscape. And so on that note, next slide please. So for those of you who don't know 3C, we're one of the largest providers of specialist IT consultancy to the social housing sector. But we don't just work with housing associations and registered providers. We work with a myriad of the suppliers as well. And boy, have they had to deal with a level of disruption in recent times. Some good examples of people we've been working with, National Housing Federation, Housemark, CIH. These are organisations that got a tremendous amount of their revenues coming from conferences and networking groups and things like that. And these things are just evaporated in the way they used to be. And with that went a tremendous amount of their revenue. So they're having to adapt. We've got some new providers coming through as well. People like DIN. I don't know if you've come across DIN, but if you haven't, we'll talk about them in a bit more detail. Disruptive Innovators Network, and that's all about the changes going on now and how they could be introduced within the sector. Obviously, we've got Microsoft 365 and Dynamics, changing the way in which we allow data to flow within our organizations. So very, very much a key component part of what we do now. I think we first started introducing Dynamics within RHP in 2010. So it's been around for a while now, but it's beginning to come of age. And data is a big thing these days. You know, we've actually consulted with the government recently on its new data quality framework that's introducing, and this week we've been in discussions with MHCLG, of which that's a ministry of which the regulator of social housing is a part, as to whether, you know, they are going to start using data quality within the whole governance process. So yeah, lots of disruption going on. Software companies probably more so than almost anyone else. Next slide, but yeah, already beat me to it. And 3C, we're being disrupted too. Some of our traditional services just aren't in the barn the way they used to be, but we're replacing them. And this is where the grow your own comes in as well. One of the things we're doing at the moment, for instance, is developing a portal that provides consulting materials for particularly the smaller organisations that couldn't really afford 3C services very often. So this provides them all with wealth of information, and this is all developed using a SharePoint filter, a SharePoint portal that we developed internally, and that should go live on the 1st of April. And again, we've actually built these skills up internally. Next slide, please. And then we have this, which is effectively around the culture change piece. So this is all about competence. We've worked recently with Clwyd, who is the largest HA in Ireland, and they want to make sure that their skills around data are right. So they've got a new data strategy, and with that comes a whole load of data skills that they need within the organisation. And we put this kind of dashboard and competency framework together to help them assess that internally. Again, all done within the Microsoft suite. And I think things like this are going to become a component part of what we do. And this next one, another dashboard, Power BI dashboard, that's being used to monitor data quality. And we'll talk more about data and data quality assurance, because again, I think that's a component part of what every organization is going to have to get particularly good at. Next slide, please. So this is Charles Darwin, and he said it's not the strongest species that survive nor the most intelligent, but the ones who are most responsive to change. And that's what we've got to do now. And this change is not something that's new, but it has taken a bit longer than I thought, to be honest with you. This slide here was part of a keynote speech I gave at the NHF ICT conference at Olympia in November 2010. And someone had asked me if I'd speak on the topic of this new thing called the cloud and how it was going to impact the sector. And I at the end made it very clear to everyone that if they weren't ready to embrace the cloud and adapt to make the most of it, then we are likely to lose relevance within our organisations. Well, that was 11 years ago, so it has taken a little bit longer, but I think we all agree it has happened now, and things seem to be moving ever faster than they've ever done before. Next slide, please. I mentioned DIN earlier. If you don't know DIN, I would Disruptive Innovators Network. I would recommend you to take a look, because this is probably the fastest growing network in social housing. They didn't exist a couple of years ago, but now I think they've got well over 100 members. And the idea of the group is to introduce innovation and encourage the things to change within the sector. And they also carry out, there's quite a few collaboration groups that they have that are working on things like prop tech and artificial intelligence that could be extremely valuable. So not quite yet, please, back a slide. Now they brought out last summer this document, The Future of Housing IT, which was referred to within the kind of advertising for this event. And next slide, please. And what this has basically said is that that IT has got to change, and we are no longer a kind of a support function, but we are becoming a real primary strategic component of the business. And so often in social housing, we've had a situation where IT department has been a bit of a silo, and its representation at executive level has been the finance director. I mean, go figure, how does that one work? You know, I can understand finance directors are very interested in return on investment, value for money, and this is all associated with what IT can bring, but generally talks a very different language to that of IT. And you could argue as well that not in the best position to therefore direct and mentor those within IT. So things like that have got to change. We're often asked to come in and review IT departments, and we do find problems, but not often always the IT department's fault. It's that lack of understanding within the business. There is a need for representation at an executive level, and we are beginning to see it. We're seeing a new breed of CIOs particularly come into the business. One of the services that we have, which we call the virtual director, which is kind of a part-time IT director that can come in and provide assistance one day a month or whatever it may be. You know, that's taken off in recent times, and it needs to, because from a governance perspective, the regulator is looking for organizations to have key expertise at that senior level. And let's face it, technology is now absolutely key to the running of a business, so it has to be there. And this is an opportunity for us all to kind of raise our game and become part of that kind of senior level decision making. Next slide, please. And what we're seeing is technology changing. So when we talked about IT, certainly for the last 20 years or so, we'd normally be talking about computers and networks and software. That's changing. It's all about the I now, the information. You know, technology is just an enabler. It's the information that's going to power our business and help us deliver great value, great customer service, and it'll provide us with the insight we need to achieve it. Next slide, please. And we're in, again, a wonderful position. You know, technology and data touch everything in the business. If we want to get our customer service right, we need the right technology and data. Those processes that will ensure we offer great service, particularly those online, need people with the skills around technology and data. You know, the people and culture piece, you know, culture change eats technology change for breakfast. So we need those that can translate the technology so that the people appreciate that it's going to give them a better life, it's going to help them provide better services, it's going to improve things, and you know, there's an important part for IT to play in there. Next slide, please. And we talk about that seat at the top table and being able to kind of translate technology or business needs into technology solutions. And you know, again, from a 3C perspective, it's, if we talk about technology, we'll often see the people we're talking to, if they're not technologists, we'll see their lights go off. And that's because these are the things that they really care about. These are the things that are hitting the boardroom table at the moment: health and safety around fire, etc., governance and making sure you get a, you know, best grading you possibly can, customer satisfaction, value for money, how we're going to operate post-COVID. You know, these are the things that that they're going to be talking about currently. And if you survey them, 96% of them will say that technology and data will provide the solution. And things like Power Platforms, you know, simple workflows, getting these things that traditionally have been a problem internally. I mean, we've recently looked at things like holiday planners and room bookings and things like that. They can simply be done using these kind of low-code type techniques. So a tremendous opportunity for us as IT people to embed ourselves in the business and help create that change. Next slide, please. And boy, do HAs need us to help. You know, they're under an illusion in many cases that they're doing well around technology. This was a survey carried out a few years ago, and we asked housing association executives to rank where they were on their journey, and 40% of them said that they consider themselves innovators and early adopters, and another 40% said they were part of the early majority. So they're all very bullish about how they foresaw themselves, and yet half of them didn't expect to be using AI within their call centers by 2025. and a quarter of them didn't believe they'd be using data to better manage tenancies and arrears by 2025. I mean, that's just crazy. And you know, these organizations, our organizations, may feel that we're ahead of the curve, but that may be compared to each other, because compared to other sectors, as Bob said earlier, we're often in the dark ages and we're lagging some years behind. Next slide, please. This is a statement from Nick Atkins. He's the chief exec of Yorkshire Housing now, and probably one of the more inspirational and innovative leaders within the sector. And he believes that the problem we have is that there's just been this lack of a burning platform. And this risk-averse approach that we've had has been one that's really hindered the sector. He made this comment here: why councils got really good at self-serve. It's because they've a massive burning platform. They've had a 40% reduction in their budgets, so they haven't got the people to deal with all the service desk stuff that they used to have. So, and I don't know if those figures are actually right, but it's true. You know, if you have to do something, then you do it. Nick thinks that coronavirus has created a burning platform of sorts, and I suggest he's right in that. He also says another burning platform is universal credit, and that it will put 63% of income that was previously guaranteed at risk. Now, this is the kind of stuff that other sectors have had to deal with for years, so it's nothing new. But we've just been fortunate enough within this sector where it hasn't been a major issue. Next slide, please. And Nick's answer to it is that he's not going to actually employ anyone else. He's just going to use staff differently. So come back to this developing your own talent. You know, why do your own talent rather than, you know, bring it in? Well, you know, we've all got tremendous knowledge of our business that you just can't bring in from outside unless someone's coming from somewhere else in the sector. It's often much cheaper to grow your own talent as well. And if we look at what motivates people to come to work, we like to think it's money, but generally no, money is considered a demotivator, believe it or not, because once we've had it a few months, it's just the money we're on, and we just take it for granted. If we're not happy with our money, it can be a major demotivator every single day. But the things that motivate us to come to work are things like recognition, development, as I've just said, the environment that we work in, and the security we feel in our jobs. So yeah, we need to make sure our environment is right. And in order to do that, particularly when we're working from home these days, is to make sure we have the right technology. If the technology is right, generally, we'll probably have a good day. If the technology lets us down, oh my goodness, can it be frustrating. Next slide, please. We've also got to get the data right. I mentioned this earlier. Data is now considered new oil, as many of you have probably heard. But when you think about it for a moment, if we're making decisions in the business, you know, just look at some of these points here. You know, would you prefer to make decisions based on science or gut feel? Would you like to empower your teams to make the right decisions and get things fixed first time? You know, these are all questions that are obvious answers to. You know, would you rather make decisions based on 90% fact and 10% gut feel? You know, it's obvious. That's the way it needs to be, and not the other way around. Next slide. And from a governance perspective, the regulator are really focusing in on this, because far too often they're finding that things that they've been told prove not to be correct. And so we're beginning to hear the words "prove it" now far more frequently used. And this comment here: one accurate measurement can be worth 1,000 expert opinions. It's true. You know, when we're making decisions, we want to make them based on fact, not someone's opinion. Those opinions can far too often be impacted by our own personal view as to what we want to achieve, and that's not necessarily always in the best interest of the business. Next slide. But let's not kid ourselves. Getting hold of this data can be a real problem. We have this kind of myriad of software systems and spreadsheets that don't talk to each other. We've got executive teams that, as I've said, lack the skills in this area and often know that they've got problems, but because they don't know how to deal with them. They just find them too much of a challenge, so they don't address them. You know, as technologists, we have the ability to liberate this information and help our organizations to work far more effectively. It's those organizations that get this data challenge sorted that are the ones that are going to flourish in the future. We've got this classic situation of being kind of data rich and information poor, and that's got to change. We need, and as IT people, we have the ability to help get this kind of information that provides actionable insight within our organizations. Next slide, please. And you know, with every day that goes by, we create more data. I think they say that that every 2 years the amount of data in the world doubles. And IoT, which is kind of a fairly hot topic at the moment for many, is a great example of that. But there's no good point at putting IoT in if we're not going to be able to use the information and insight that provides. We have a customer in Scotland, and they had a real push for wanting to adopt IoT to show that they were kind of on the cutting edge of technology. And yet when we put the question to them, well, what are you going to do with the information and the data? They hadn't even thought of it. And that's where the opportunity is, getting data savvy IT people to help them to turn what could be a hugely valuable technology that can change the way you operate from being kind of failure based, because let's face it, at the moment so often it's event based what we do. You know, somebody falling into arrears, a repair being needed, something failing. You know, it's all reactive, unplanned, unstructured, inefficient, ineffective. It's not a great way to work. There is a better way, but it's all about gathering information and doing something with it. Next slide, please. And this isn't new. This is my own experience. I used to be the managing director of a business called Montal. We bought that business in 2007. It was in a few problems at that stage, but it was okay. There was definitely improvement that could be made. But the big difference was in 2008, we were hit by a burning platform, which was Northern Rock going bust. And as a result of that, the banks all kind of closed up. They wanted their money back. They put kind of tougher covenants in place. And we had to change the way we operated to survive. We used a kind of IoT as a piece of software called Kaseya, and we seeded that on our customers' systems, and then that started to give us information about what those systems were doing. And so often we could spot they were starting to fail before they actually failed, and we could try and do something about it. And this had an enormous impact on the business, and by 2014 we'd grown the business by over 3 times. We'd only added 2 more people to the service desk, so much more was being done online and proactively, but more importantly, we were much more efficient in the way we dealt with the calls that we received. So only 19% of the phone calls actually led us to go to site, and when we did go to site, we were usually far better equipped to have the spare parts needed and fix things first time. So come back to this: if you've got the information and you can do it and work proactively, you can save a fortune and work hugely more proficiently. And this isn't new. This is things that are going on elsewhere and have been for years. Next slide, please. So right now we have a chronic shortage of digital skills. And I come back to it. The easiest option is to grow your own. There is the potential to trap people in, and let's be honest, that potential is probably greater now than it has been for years, because we are within a very stable market that compared to things like retail and travel. But I come back to it. Growing your own is for the reasons already given, often so much of a better idea. You know, but we've got to make sure that we are now the people that are going to come into the business and help solve the problems. You know, we have a fantastic opportunity, because this is a sector that provides so much good, so much purpose. helping individuals and communities. You know, we really are in a position where we can help use technology to produce real, tangible social value. Next slide, please. We're also going to need to manage our suppliers better. You know, we've often done things in-house, and people have said, you know, well, I don't want to outsource it because well, you have to bring it back in again at a later date. Well, that's not going to be an option in the future. We've got to get better at managing our suppliers, and this is a great opportunity for us as teams to be the custodians of the supplier relationship, to make sure we're getting good value, high quality services, to make sure that they're safe and they're compliant. And that's all about, again, understanding what our businesses need and actually getting out there, working within the departments, and not just within the IT team. You know, we've got to understand how it works, and again, help them to become more effective, help them and empower them to provide social value. Next slide, please. There's still going to be a need for a help desk, but in fact, I think I'm right in saying that generally the statistics are during the last year we've seen help desk calls go up, but the clever thinking is that they're going to go down. We're going to see much more in the way of self-serve, so we are going to need to morph what we do. You know, we're going to look at that, you know, the data management and analytics side much more. We're going to be reviewing the processes within our various departments and deciding whether they can be made more efficient using technology and automation. We're going to be developing these applications, and we are going to be the people who are going to enable machine learning, AI, and all this innovative stuff that's going to make an enormous difference. Next slide. And as I say, you know, these housing associations we work for need help. When we did this future gazing, future shaping survey a couple of years ago, it was the second survey we'd done in 2 years. And what we noticed was that in the first time we did it, which was back in 2017, that I think about 63% of organisations said they were actively going through a transformation programme. And when we did the same survey 2 years later, there were less, 54% I think it was, were going through active transformation. And why? Because so many of these transformation programs had failed to hit the objectives that these organizations had wanted. So yeah, there was a need for change and support. Coronavirus, just before I finish, been a fantastic proof of concept. So many of the things IT people have been saying for a very long time have been proven, and we've had to start working online anytime, any place, starting to use low-code kind of applications to develop solutions for remote working. We've seen an enormous amount of channel shift go on as people who'd resisted, you know, going online and dealing with organizations have now had to. And there are now some social housing providers who have pretty much got 80% of all customer transactions happening online. So these things are very possible. So just to finish off, so back to this report that Din did, there were 4 recommendations that came out of it. The first was that IT must have that voice at the highest level if these organizations are going to succeed and flourish in the future. We need to develop skills internally. We need to change the way we operate throughout the business, but particularly within IT. And we need to make sure we develop those skills that we need for the future. We need to better use data. You know, absolutely, data is going to be king, and it is going to make all the difference to organizations. So those with the skills to help to achieve that are going to be in huge demand. And then we need to move services to the cloud. We need to be able to operate anytime, any place, anywhere. So that brings me to a conclusion. Just to say, last slide. If we get this right as IT teams, if we can help enable our organisations to use technology better, we will make the world a happier place. And it's a fact. You know, if you use technology properly, you'll protect your income streams. You'll create efficiencies and provide better services that represent better value for money, and you will make the job of management easier and less stressful. and stress is the enemy, believe me. So if you've ever wondered why you guys all come to work in the morning, this is it. Getting the technology right is going to make a huge amount of difference. All right, that's it. We're going to move on to something a little bit more interactive now. We're going to do a survey. So next slide, please. If you hopefully you can all see this. You have the ability to answer this on screen. So I would like you to look at some of these things. I'm going to actually ask them in 3 questions here. So graded 1 to 5 within your organizations, 1 being unlikely and 5 being very likely to happen. So are you as an organization going to look at a cloud first strategy, a SaaS first strategy, in other words, software as a service, rather than actually have applications on your servers? And are you going to consider a micro-first ICT strategy? I should really have asked those as 3 different questions, but maybe let's just ask the one question. Is a cloud-first strategy likely to be the way in which your organization strategically moves in the future? So 1, no, 5, extremely likely. We'll just wait for those answers to come in.
I always hate sharing the screen. I can't see anybody. So I'm taking it that people are putting their numbers in.
Well, yeah, it looks like they're coming in. I can see it live in front of my eyes at the moment. So based on what we've got so far, effectively half of those watching have said that it's a cloud first strategy, and 38% very likely to be. So I think you add those 2 together and you've got almost 90% of organizations saying cloud first. So we've got a second question here, Microsoft first strategy. Now, this is something I'm hearing more commonly these days. So could I ask you again, 1 for no and 5 for very likely. So if you could vote now, that would be great. And well, Microsoft will be pleased to hear this. 55% saying Microsoft first, which is interesting. There's a chunk of who are kind of sitting on the fence here at 27%, but no one who's saying definitely not. So it just seems to be saying that Microsoft has got relevance out there for us all. So we'll go for the next slide, please. So again, strongly disagree, 5 strongly agree. For the last 10 years, IT roles in housing have been largely focused on the management and support technology. The future role of IT will be focused on information rather than technology. So if you could vote now on that one. Has it come up? There we go. So right, okay, yeah, sorry. We'll so they have Emily did a fantastic job, by the way. She's actually done, I haven't run through this, but she's done a great job there. But so we've skipped that first question. Future role of IT will be more focused on I rather than T. So if you vote now. So we seem to be in general agreement on that as well. So again, we're looking at 80% of us kind of agreeing with that. Few of us again sitting on the fence. Next slide, please. Technology will play an important part in helping organisations to monitor staff performance and welfare when working remotely. This is quite a touchy one, because this obviously looks at how we monitor staff at home. So I'll be interested in your thoughts on that one. So yeah, if you could vote on that now, that would be great. So yeah, we look like that the majority of us think that's going to be the case. I mean, from my point of view, I think it is very likely, because we need to look after the welfare of our people. It's not a spy actually checking if they're working. This is about making sure they're okay, making sure they aren't being working too longer hours or being monopolized by particular other members of staff. So it'll be interesting to see. And again, I think technology teams will play a important part in helping with that process. Next slide, please. And this, I think this is the last one. Applications will dictate whose cloud is used rather than the best cloud provider. This is an interesting one in as far as you've got people like AWS, who obviously have fantastic cloud platforms. They do. But are people going to pick the cloud platform because it's the best cloud platform, or are they going to pick the application? And then depending on what application that platform is on, will depend on what cloud platform they find themselves on. So if you could vote on that, that would be great. Okay, so we're up there again. Yeah, that 71% of us, or moving a little bit now, but the majority think that it's the application that's going to drive the decision. We have seen it actually. We've seen a number of cloud providers come into the sector and not doing nearly as well as they thought they would, and it's because I believe people are making their decisions based on applications. Right, that brings an end to my piece. I'm going to hand over now. If we that's it. We move on now to the apprenticeship side of things.
Yeah,
Cara.
sorry. Yeah, so thanks. Yep, you can hear me. So thanks for that, Colin. I think what's been really useful there is just kind of that backdrop, and coming back to the question around the webinar is there's a lot going on. We've covered there about so many different facets now that are part of IT and part of the business that years ago were just not as key or as important. And I think the words grow your own have come up so often through this conversation, and again bringing it back to what I said at the opening is we're good at that in housing. We're really good at that. We've proven it, we've done it, but this is different. And I think from that very beginning, when you go into looking at new platforms and having this ambition to be self-sufficient, that looking at how you can achieve that is so very important. I'm going to hand over now to Kat and Martin, who are going to talk you through a similar scenario that Crimson have. So as Crimson, we are a supplier and we're a gold partner. We work with housing associations to provide specialist skills and consultancy support. However, we also know, as Colin has alluded to, and also Bob, is this new platform, this new technology is in demand by everybody. And actually, we value quite strongly the certain skills that are required to be able to really deliver to that very highest standards. And we thought about this, and Kat and Martin will go into it, and actually looked at we could grow our own. And we're going to talk you through now. And the purpose of this is to hopefully inspire you to look at the model that we have brought in place at Crimson. And can this actually be used within the housing sector? One of which I think absolutely, and there are organisations that have been looking at their IT team and have been looking at apprentices, but it's about thinking it about very differently, and we're going to talk through just how Crimson do that. So I'm going to hand over to you, Kat and Martin, and I'll drive the slides as best I can.
Thanks, Kira. So yes, we're really passionate about our apprentices, what we call Crimson Academy, and I'm really happy to share our journey. Starting point, really, I want to be very honest about is I joined the organisation in 2019. I had absolutely no understanding of apprenticeships whatsoever. I had no background with apprenticeships. I wasn't a trainer. I came in with as a certified change management practitioner. So I think that's really important to state from the off. 4 months after I joined, we onboarded our first cohort of 8 apprentices, and none of that would have been possible without having what's really key, which is a strong strategic partner. And I think it applies to everything in life, actually, having that sort of strong partner. In our case, it's with Digital Native. They're a bespoke IT training provider, and that's why I wanted them to join today, just to give an insight into what they do, but also how they can support. So next slide, please, Kira. So where did we start? Well, we started with a business problem back in, actually, it was 2018. We had a strong 3-year strategic growth plan. When I joined the organisation, there were 60 employees. We've now got just over 100 employees. We had that really strong growth plan. The challenge we had was, as we've talked about already, Colin's alluded to it, I think Robert did also, this digital skills gap in the UK, which we did face. As an SME, we were challenged around providing the sort of incentives and packages that, you know, the big organisations could offer, you know, the big names, the big logos, that, you know, multiple holiday annual leaves and all that comp and bend. So we were challenged to, you know, attract the sort of talent that we needed to. And we do bring people on board at that level, but we knew that we had to grow. We had to grow at our future talent as well. So that there was sort of the business problem where we started. The solution for us, so we'd already dabbled with apprentices. We had 5 when I joined the organisation, but we recognised actually to do it properly, we needed to invest. We were fortunate, we got some investment from Harvey Nash, but because we already knew what we wanted to do with apprentices, we knew we could leverage the government apprenticeship levy. We already had a relationship with digital natives, so it was a case of then building out a very holistic degree apprenticeship program. In terms of the apprenticeship standards, well, there's a lot more now in the IT space. We've chosen software tester, business analyst, and data analyst. There are more to choose from. I'll give you a bit of an insight as to why we chose them. So software tester route we thought was a really good introductory background to the software life cycle for someone that knew nothing about tech. I'll talk about that a bit later in terms of the sort of individuals we were looking for, but if you consider someone that's got no background in tech whatsoever, that software tester gives them a really good insight into the entire software life cycle. It also played to where we wanted to develop, which was to improve the quality of our solutions, so by testing them more thoroughly, I guess, before they go live. And you know, that's the software tester's point of being. In terms of the BA apprenticeship, we introduced that last year, and that was because we think that translates very nicely into a functional consultant role. All of the sort of gathering customer requirements, you know, understanding the business pain points, etc., that plays to the sort of competencies that show in that role. This year, when we're just about to start our recruitment drive this year, we're focused on data analysts because we're now focused on building out a data insights practice. So that will be building for our future. But this is long term. This is not sort of, you know, hit and run and they're going to be up and running today, and we recognise that. So year 1 is a level 4 apprenticeship, and then years 2 and 3 are the levels 5 and 6, where they can go on, if they choose to, they can carry on and do a digital and technology solutions degree focused in one of 3 areas, which could be coding, developing, or consultancy. Next slide, please. And I should actually say that for us, we have recruited new, but the apprenticeship scheme can be used to develop and upskill. And I think something I'm quite passionate about as well is the opportunity for career changes. So, you know, there's often a thought that it's just school leavers. And yeah, we do recruit school leavers, but we also recruit grads. We had 6 grads join us last year, and many of those had already started careers in different sectors, and that brings innovation and creativity and, you know, this strong insight into the organisation, which is fantastic. And I'll talk about that a bit later as well. So business benefits, really, you know, growing our own talent pipeline. That was the strategic objective, to start growing our own talent to scale for growth. And since I joined, we've brought in 18 apprentices. We've got 22 in total out of 100 plus employees, and we're looking to bring in a minimum of 5 this year. So it certainly has delivered what we wanted, which was to start building out the growth of the organisation. But has it helped? Has it added value for us? Yes, absolutely. Apprentices, it's absolutely fantastic working with them, whether they're straight from school or whether they're from other sectors, because what they do, they challenge our thinking around providing solutions, because, you know, we might have a very specific, almost siloed way of approaching a solution. These young people and people from different sectors will approach it very differently, and it opens our eyes, and it means that we've got a much more open way of approaching business problems for our clients. And in terms of additional value, so what it's meant, we've brought these juniors in, up and running. They work on client projects quite early on, obviously alongside our experienced consultants, but straight away they're getting an understanding. They're working alongside and shadowing those consultants, and they're able quite quickly, I'd say between 4 and 6 months, they're able to start adding value with either software testing or, even just taking notes during a client meeting, and doing some of the sort of simpler tasks around configuration, which means our functional consultants can focus on more complex tasks, and that's what we're paying them for ultimately. So our apprentices are delivering tangible value to our organisation. 6 months in, they're 50% billable. 9 months in, on many tasks, they're 100% billable, because that's the level of expertise that we're encouraging them to have. And of course, there are consequential benefits to what we've done as well. I mean, we're so passionate about our apprenticeship scheme. And, as I said, my background, I knew nothing about apprenticeships whatsoever. In fact, I probably fitted into the category of a lot of parents in the UK, which is thinking that apprenticeships are an inferior route to university. I was still encouraging my son to go to university. That's all changed now. I'm trying to encourage him to think about an apprenticeship. There's so many benefits to it. But for us as an organisation, what's fantastic, I mean, we're on this call with you today talking about, our journey. We were absolutely delighted to win a number of awards last year, including the West Midlands Regional Regional Apprenticeship Employer for SME of the Year. We also got a highly commended status in the National Apprenticeship Employer of the Year, which for us, we're a small organisation. It was a external validation that what we're doing is right. So, we absolutely celebrated that. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that having a strong strategic partner is really important. Martin's just going to give you an insight into digital native and then talk through the apprenticeship levy and the mechanics there.
Thanks, Kat. Firstly, I really welcome the opportunity to join the call today. I guess from my perspective, when we think about self-sufficiency, and especially within tech, we're looking about moving to an internal capacity. And if we think capacity is about people, process and tech, I think the great thing about the call this morning is we've got some people that would love to talk to you about the tech. We've got some people that would love to talk to you about the processes, and we would love to be talking to you about how you grow people. And I think just a quick overview of Digital Native, we describe ourselves as a niche training provider, which means we only deliver digital apprenticeships, and we offer a small subset of those digital apprenticeships. And I guess the key thing that we're looking to do is we're looking to work with what we call like-minded employers that are looking to develop great digital talent in the future. And I think picking up on some of Kat's comments previously, to me, a good apprenticeship is about solving a business problem. And I think the reason that we work incredibly well with Crimson and the Crimson Academy is that they were very transparent. They sat down, they shared with us some of the business problems they were hoping the apprenticeship would challenge and overcome. And what we were simply able to do was agree a set of outcomes from our apprenticeship programs, and we agreed how we would measure success. So I think that covers the final sentence that I've got there, which is whether you work with Digital Native, whether you work with any of the other great training providers that are out there, make certain that you've got a great relationship, make sure that it's based on trust, and always be striving for that excellence. So I won't cover this slide in any depth. I think all the previous speakers have covered this. Obviously, there is a skills gap out there. It's difficult to find the right people. Typically, what we're finding with most of our customers are they have great people internally they're looking to develop. And those individuals make fantastic apprentices because, as Colin was saying, they have that domain knowledge of how your business works. They understand what you do, and most importantly, they've bought into the purpose of your organisation. And we've got fantastic case studies of people that have joined tech apprenticeship programs from places like call centres. Really know the pain points in an organisation, know what creates issues for your customers. It's difficult to attract. Again, as previous speakers have said, if you've got skills in these areas, you've got a lot of choices. The other thing that I think apprenticeships can bring, and again, going back to something that Kat mentioned, is it can increase the diversity of your organisation. Apprenticeships are all about identifying entry points into your organisation and how you can attract that diverse talent pool. And again, we're seeing fantastic individuals applying. And one thing I'd just like to cover here is an apprentice probably doesn't look, sound or feel like what you probably think an apprentice looks, sounds and feels like. So if I think of some of the recent people, we've just onboarded an apprentice who has a first-class honours degree and a PhD in philosophy, who lost a job at the start of lockdown and spent her time learning how to code, and has decided she wants to do that as a career. What a great brain to bring into an organisation. It could be an A-level leaver with 4 stars at A-level, or it could be a number of people in your organisation that have already bought into what you're trying to do, and we can obviously help with developing those technical skills. Quick overview of what we broadly do here. So as you can see, we've got kind of 3 key strands. We do some stuff around software. We do some stuff around, I guess, the data business analyst side, and we do a little bit of infrastructure as well. And as Kat quite rightly said, we also offer progression onto degree apprenticeships. I wanted to give you this piece of feedback because I think it's always difficult when you're looking at training providers to try and decide who you should partner with. And that's a really, really important decision. And I'm one of the individuals, I like to go back to what previous apprentices say about us. They're brutally honest in their feedback, and it's always fantastic to receive that and to be able to respond. And I love this piece of feedback because I think it sums up digital native perfectly. So I'll just give you a moment to read that. And I think the reason I particularly enjoyed that is it talks about, I think, the difference between knowledge or academic learning and the ability to apply that in the workplace. And I think what we're about is developing good people. Good people need knowledge, but they also need to be able to apply it in the workplace and add value in your business. Thank you. So a little bit about the apprenticeship levy. You're probably all broadly aware of the apprenticeship levy. Some of you may have accessed it, but in brief, the government thought it would be a really good idea if they asked larger employers to contribute to the nation's apprenticeship bill. And they asked for organisations with a PAYE bill of more than 3 million to contribute 0.5% of their payroll bill to this. It's taken at source. The important thing to remember here is if you don't use this money, then at some point it goes back to HMRC. So you can see it as a tax if you're not using it to add to the skills base in your organisation. And the idea is you build up a fund, and then that fund is then used to pay for the apprenticeships that you wish to have delivered within your organisation. One fact that isn't always known is that once you've exhausted your apprenticeship levy, if you want to deliver more apprenticeships, and a lot of organisations are in this position, the government very kindly still pays 95% of those apprenticeships. A lot of organisations do think once they've exhausted their apprenticeship levy fund, then they have to pay 100%. It's actually not the case. The maximum bill you would ever end up with an apprenticeship is 5% of the total cost.
Thanks, Martin. And that was one of the areas where I was really glad we had a strong partner to help us understand the mechanics of the apprenticeship levy. It's not So straightforward. So I just want to talk through a little bit of how we approached the apprenticeship program and how we set it up, so that it might, if you decide to do the same, it might take away some of the mystery. So we started with, as you should always start with, what's the vision of what's the end product look like that we want to end up with. I interviewed, actually it was when I interviewed for the role, I asked what is it we want to end up with, and I put these words together. We wanted to create rounded, successful tech professionals, and I spent some time thinking about what does that actually mean. So just move on to the next slide, Kira. So in terms of the successful rounded professionals, the first thing that I recognise is, regardless of whether you've got someone coming straight from school, you've got someone that's taken the very courageous step to leave a career, the sort of comfort space of something they know really well, to move into the new tech sector, or someone in the organisation that's taken a step to upskill. We recognise that we wanted to sort of give them this sort of development support. So we do that with 3 ways. Each of our apprentices, regardless of their entry route, is assigned a mentor, a buddy and a coach. The mentor is someone that they can shadow, provides them on-job training. This is a lead consultant or a practice lead. They're a professional role model, and they're someone that's outside of the project that our apprentices can go to just sound them out, ask questions, and just give them that sort of technical support. A buddy is a year 2 apprentices, and they provide them sort of support and guidance around the sort of course content. How do they put together the evidence for their portfolio, how they balance work, study, etc., and lessons learned from the year before. And then finally, we think coaching is really important. So Digital Native provide a coach, and we provide monthly coaching for our apprentices. And this is really that sort of absolutely essential, no hidden agenda, headspace time for the apprentices to talk about whatever it is that they want to talk about. It could be what's going on in their personal life, it could be what's going on in work, and we do spend quite a lot of time thinking about underlying beliefs and assumptions that might be blockers to their success. So it's very, very personally driven. If someone doesn't want to talk much, we might stay on the call for 10 minutes. When we could be out in the wider world, we would walk around Birmingham Business Park, and we would do the coaching while we were sort of walking, which is a fantastic way to do it. But with these 3 sort of elements, I think is a great way that we're supporting our individuals and actually making them feel valued and acknowledged within the organisation. We're not just bringing them in, throwing them onto an apprenticeship scheme. We're giving them that additional support, and I think it's vital to get the best out of the apprentice and the apprenticeship to give that additional support. Next slide, please, Kira. So when we think about the rounded, what does that mean? Well, often you can have someone that's an absolute expert when it comes to tech, and I know you'll all be thinking of individuals now when I say this, that you'll know someone. They're absolutely brilliant around tech, but can they articulate a conversation with someone? Can they share that knowledge? No. They may have problems in describing what they can see so vividly in their mind. So from our perspective, that rounded is emotional intelligence. Just click on and build up that slide, Kira. It's emotional intelligence, and the way we, it's quite a difficult one to think, well, how do you train that? How do you build that awareness? So next slide, we talk about we have a knowledge academy, and what we recognise to sort of shape and enhance their emotional intelligence, we cover a whole variety of topics, everything from building effective communication skills to self-awareness and growth mindset, covering business skills around time management and business change for school leavers, recognising this is all going to be very new to them, how they start shaping their personal branding. We're in the age of tech, social media. It's really important they understand that, not just for their careers in Crimson, but shaping their future careers as well. A bit about financial awareness and key topics around diversity and inclusion and stress management, and then how to shape their sort of careers going forward. So we have these monthly sessions, normally about half a day, and they are really there to develop their emotional intelligence and their breadth of knowledge, so that when they go out and meet clients, they can have those conversations, a whole variety of topics. And to that point as well, we have a mandatory reading list that covers, you'll probably recognise some of these books. And again, that the aim for that was to help them to, have this breadth of knowledge that they could tap into and build real relationships with people. Because the challenge particularly about the younger generation is this, this gap in the ability for social chat, and that's where you develop relationships. So we didn't want to miss that in developing our apprentices. Next slide, please. So this is just an insight really into our program. It's a little bit busy, but essentially we cover off, we have a Crimson induction. Digital native do an induction around whatever the skill is that we're teaching them. We have a consultant toolkit which focuses on the skills to be, a consultant, which is around, how to have client-led conversations, understanding business problems, gathering those requirements, playing them back, configuration, etc., etc. Our apprentices, within sort of 5 weeks, they are assigned to projects. So they work alongside a project team, alongside their mentors to start with. And as they develop their skills, they'll start doing more and more complex tasks on those projects. So we work very closely with PMO to resource them to projects that can build up those skills and also utilise the skills as they grow their competencies. You'll see the Knowledge Academy stretches out for the first sort of 10 months. And you'll see at the bottom there that they are encouraged to take a variety of Microsoft exam. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, so we have to evidence our competence there. And that's great for them as individuals, because they take them, that goes onto their CV, it gives them that feeling of competence themselves and capability. We celebrate their successes. It's fantastic. It's almost weekly we're sending out emails to say congratulations on passing your latest exam. So that's kind of the essence and an overview of the programme. Next slide, please. And in terms of where we recruit from, well, we're based in Birmingham Business Park. We're passionate about supporting our local higher education providers. So we've selected 3 schools and a university that we can reach out and almost have an outreach program with them. We're lucky because we have a recruitment arm of our business. So we have recruitment consultants that can provide some of the vocational support to years 10 plus, things like mock interviews, CV writing, all of those essential skills that are really important for young people as they sort of start their careers. But more than that, we also built up a relationship with St Paul's School, because we recognise, there is that gender gap, particularly in tech. I certainly see it when I go to schools, and you walk into an IT classroom and there's predominantly male, maybe 1 or 2 girls in the classroom. We still need to challenge that. And talking about diversity and inclusion, if you go to the next slide, Kira, I talked about this earlier, and I've got a couple of slides just to demonstrate how our apprentices have, and having an apprenticeship scheme has impacted our diversity and added that into our organisation. But if we go back to our original problem, which was, strategic growth plan and growing to scale our business, you can see back in 2017, we had no apprentices and we just had over 40 employees. And you can see as we've grown as a business, so too have we grown in terms of our apprenticeship scheme to map that. So going from 9% of our employees were apprentices, and now we're sitting at 22%, which is fantastic. Next slide. When I joined the organisation, we had 5 apprentices. They were all male. I said, we've got to do something about that. That's not acceptable. So I challenged myself when I joined to get 50% of the cohort female. The challenge is that there's no pipeline. There's very little pipeline, predominantly male applicants. So I looked at the advert, I looked at the language we were using, I looked at where we advertised. I put myself out there, I'm a female in tech, did all of those things and managed to get, three of our successful applicants were female, so 3 out of 8. Last year we employed a further 10 and 4 of those were female. So we're now at about 32%. Not quite there at my 50%. I'm still going, Kira. I'm still working at it. But to be fair, it's the pipeline that's a challenge. I understand by age 9 or 10, a girl at school has switched off from tech if she can't see a female role model, which is the challenge we as an organisation are looking at as well. It's not just about gender, of course. We also look at age. So back in 2018, you can see. And quite typically in terms of apprenticeship schemes, it's quite young. We had 1 18-year-old and 4 between 19 and 24. And as again, we've looked at where we're recruiting and how we're recruiting and the words that we're using. you'll see this year now we've taken on we've taken on 6 grads, 4 of which are 25 years plus. In fact, one's 39. He's married with 3 children. So he's had to have a real healthy dose of growth mindset to come away from the sector. He was in public sector, come away from that sector where he was an expert, and learn something completely new. But he's absolutely excelling. So the opportunities are there, and I think the rewards are there as well for those that are willing to take that step. And they are all adding value to our projects, which is a really exciting place to be. Thank you, Kira. I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
Thanks, Kat. I'm just going to put this down so I can see the chat, because it is horrible talking to people that I can't see. So I hope that's been quite useful for you all. I'm going to open the out for some questions, but what I really wanted from today was to almost share with you what Kat and Martin have put so eloquently there, a story around how we've all got this, we're saying in the sector that there is a real drive for new technologies. Microsoft technologies are becoming part of the day-to-day. We know that there's a skills gap within the housing sector, and within the wider sector, we know that there's a skills gap. So actually, if I stop sharing for a minute, because then you're not looking at yourself, but we also know, and this is where I feel quite passionate, we know in housing that some of the stuff that Kat's talked to us about, we already do, and we are quite good at. We have apprentices, but actually looking at the IT arm, how can we develop and bring some of that best practice into this area that we're now expanding, but we know that there's potentially a skills gap. So I wanted to open it out to some questions. I can see if you want to put them in the chat or put your hand up. Rob, you've got one, so I'm going to let you start. If you want to unmute yourself. Cheers, Rob. Oh, I can see you now as well. Hello.
That was really what an exciting and what a fascinating Crimson story about the apprenticeship scheme, and obviously the energy and the passion that Kat's injected into that role is palpable, right? But a couple of questions come to mind. I mean, first, an observation about your gender balance, and I noticed one of the schools in the local neighbourhood was an all-girls school. So clearly, you're targeting all-girls schools to help get you to that 50%. That's fantastic. But what I was going to ask about was this kind of concept of retaining these people, because, there's a massive flight risk that they kind of earn their stripes on your watch and then rush off to a 6-figure salary down the road somewhere quite rapidly. So I imagine you've got all sorts of succession plans and strategies in place to retain these people, yeah?
That's a really good point. And actually, I mean, I have to say, we've got 100% retention of our apprentices so far. But that said, none of them have finished the degree yet. So, but one of them has decided not to go on to carry on to do the degree, and she stayed with the business. I think there's 2 points there. Absolutely, it's around the package. And young people, the challenge for us is, they don't realise how good they've got it in terms of the employer that they're working at. We're very proud of Crimson. It's a fantastic family environment. They don't know that until they've tried elsewhere, which is the challenge. But I think if we get the culture right, after that it is absolutely around the packages. And I think I've already flagged that's something that we need to address. And there will be some of the apprentices that are literally doing it to get their stripes, and then they will move on, and quite frankly, you kind of have to accept that that's going to happen. I think for us though, given that by month 4 to 6, we're already starting to get our return on investments. By the time they've finished their sort of 3-year degree, we will have more than recouped and again the costs of the investment. And for us, it's about building out. It's actually about helping drive that UK digital growth journey as well. So it'll be fantastic if our legacy was, Crimson build really great tech professionals.
And just
part of your CSR, part of your corporate social responsibility.
Absolutely.
Agenda.
So just,
yeah.
I know Colin and Martin have both got their hands up, but Rob, just bringing that back to, I suppose, housing. I think there is that fear that we're going to, if we do this and we train them up, that they're going to go to a Crimson in 2 years' time, or they're going to go to, Hitachi, they're going to go somewhere else. But I think given that there is a growth of if we just take the Microsoft technologies in this sector, part of what my drive from this is how can the sector come together and almost build up something around this skills gap collectively, maybe in locality areas, because actually we know from our apprentices in the sector and we also know from professionals, myself having been one, you look to strive to work at a smaller organisation and maybe into a larger organisation, but within that same sector. So actually is the scope where some of the larger organisations, the housing organisations, are looking at apprentices and might take on, if we look at our cohort, 8 apprentices at one go, and they're very, very able to do that. Some of the smaller organisations might only be able to have one, and they might be really fearful if they get that one and train them up, that actually they are going to then go somewhere else. So if we could collectively pull together and look maybe even in areas and use the expertise of people like digital native, could we build that pool of talent that actually can service our sector is a question. But Colin, you had your hand up first and then Martin, sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you. There was a pretty inspirational video I saw. I think it was RAC who were looking at the retraining of people internally. And I don't know if we can find it and stick it on the chat for people, but there is this enormous opportunity to retrain people we already have within. So I suppose a question I had for Kat is how might it work if we had people within our teams currently that we wanted to maybe on a part-time basis to do the apprenticeship and therefore retrain in certain different areas?
I guess it would depend on the pathway, but it's absolutely possible. Our Crimson Academy is open to all. So, for example, we've got a recruitment part of the business. And if any of the recruiters wanted to transfer into solutions, I guess the apprenticeship scheme would be a way for them to do it. So it's 20% is study time, 80% is on the job. So providing the role that they're doing gives them the opportunity to evidence whatever the skill set pathway they're on, then that would be absolutely fine.
Martin?
I think my point would be, it's the old cliche, what's going to happen if we train these individuals? Well, what's going to happen if we don't?
Yes.
And I think what we have to recognise that, especially within tech, average tenure in positions is only around 18 months. What we see within apprenticeships is typical average tenure of 4 to 5 years. So you're getting them to be around at least for a little bit longer. And I think also going back to some of the reflections from earlier, it's thinking about why do people leave an employer? And I think Colin said it's very rarely about money. Typically what techies want to do is be working on bigger and more complex problems. So as long as you can throw problems at people that they find enjoyable and they feel they're remunerated fairly, then they should grow within your organisation. But certainly typical average tenure for an apprenticeship is longer. And again, as you said earlier, looking to develop and grow people from within the business is another, if they've been there with you for 4 or 5 years and you're giving them new skills, again, why are they going to be moving on at that stage?
Excellent. Anyone else got anything they want to add? Any questions? Do you think those of you in the sector, this is an option? This is something we should be considering, or housing associations should look to consider? Just looking at any names, if anybody's going to pop anything in the chat. I appreciate it's over dinner time. So, but is any?
You say, yeah. What's the situation? Sorry, it's me again. Why would you want us to develop our own self-sufficient talent? Doesn't that deny you guys revenue, income from consultancy that you'd otherwise sell us if we become suddenly self-sufficient? The very premise of this presentation this morning has made me smile to myself, ironically, thinking, well, this is the last thing you want, that sort of £800 to £1,000 a day, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. And the part of why we've done this is, if we go back to my first slide, every tender and every housing association I talk to tells me that's what their ambition is. I think the realistic view of that is there are some elements of that. If you go back to what is your core business as a housing provider, it's not to be an IT specialist. So I think the ambition of we want to be 100% self-sufficient, in a reality check, is what housing is there to do is to provide social housing and not be the experts necessarily in this whole area of technology. But nevertheless, you are investing a lot of money into platforms. If I take Dynamics as an example, it's a lot of money that you're investing into. Business cases are coming through the door, people are approving it. You know, I sit on a board, we've approved a Dynamics implementation, but the bit that still seems to be missing is almost that skills gap, and how you are, you know, I see time and time again, we're driving to be self-sufficient, we want to control our destiny. Actually sitting down and understanding what does that mean to you as an organization is, yes, I believe there'll always be room for consultants and there'll always be that big day rate that's going to be needed, but it's this in between bit that actually I think there is a skills gap, that if the housing sector fill that, you will be able to do a lot more yourself, and absolutely you'll make it harder for consultants like Crimson and alike. But then that's not what this is about. And I think what we wanted to share to you is the question that often I get said is, yeah, Kira, that makes sense, but what does a program look like? And what Kat explained to you there around the types of apprenticeships, if you take that one tester, that one always makes me smile, because on the majority of projects that have or go over, run over, aren't as successful, it falls back to that bracket around testing. Because certainly in housing, we're pulling people off like housing officers, people that have got a really important day job to do, to come in and start testing on things. And whilst you need that user acceptance testers, we always cut corners and bring them in to do functional testing and try, does that work? Yeah, crack on. And if you take that concept of somewhere actually where someone can learn the solution, can do that kind of gap that often falls down on some of these technology projects, to me, that I think that adds value to the organization. And my point around collaboration is, it might be that it's a pool of talent that could be shared with your neighbours, considering so many of you are moving towards this kind of platform play. So you're right, this is what we're doing now, is sharing based on what we believe is what the sector is asking for, and a way of thinking differently. I could, however, go, actually, we'll just charge you $9.50 and we'll do it all for you. And
the way I'd look at it,
I'd just add
I'd
to
look at
that,
it,
Cara, I'd like to just applaud what you guys are doing at Crimson, because we are seeing a shift in the sector, and those organisations that are putting their customers first are the ones this sector will tend to look after. You know, for too long we've had suppliers that have held us to ransom on things, and you're seeing a fight back now. And if you're providing services that customers feel are in their best interest, then you can guarantee you'll have them for years. So well done.
Yeah, I second that. So I mean, the way I look at it, what I saw in the private sector is that you need to have that day-to-day expertise within the business, and then you would engage with Crimson on bigger projects. That's where they can add that kind of value of delivering these bigger projects quicker, and the day-to-day business can be run internally, and you're self-sufficient in that manner.
We have got a feedback survey for everyone that's been on the call, and there is a chance to win some vouchers there. I think really what we wanted to achieve was to just share with you a way of thinking differently, how it needs to be built in at the very beginning, maybe not an afterthought. And I think, Rob, you've touched on a point around this, is when people say about self-sufficiency, what does it mean to your organisation, and actually how can we work better together? If anybody wants to talk further about this, we're happy to share. We're happy to come and share our story within your organisation. There might be individual people that you think would be really interesting to hear this story from Kat. And actually, we're happy to share how we've done it and work with you. So that is really, really the call out for you. And just finishing, as I always would, is there's more webinars to come. There's one next week on home builders and selling more homes, which is always really, really important. But thank you for your time. Go and have some lunch, and hopefully we'll catch up soon. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Bye.